So I am back with the most requested video, which is how do I make my candles. So you will need a couple of things. This crate here is just for demonstration purposes. I generally don't prop my melting pot on top of this, but it worked for the video, so I'm using that. But this is a melting pot. It melts my wax all at once so that I can make multiple candles without having to use that double boiler for each candle. It's just a lot easier for me to do, so I like to use this. Of course, you're going to need a pouring pitcher, and you can get this from anywhere. For all of the things that I'm using, I will list below in the description box along with links so you can see what I'm using. So you'll need the pouring pitcher for the wax, of course. I'm using 3 different types of wicks today because I'm thinking about possibly changing my wicks again. If they're still wooden wicks, but they're just a little bit different. So I'm using 3 wooden wicks. You'll need your wicks, whatever you choose to use. Then I use this little measuring glass to measure my fragrance oil. I use this little wooden stick to stir my candle when I'm mixing the fragrance into the wax. And I use this scale to measure my wax as well as my fragrance oil. On the wicks, we have wick clips, which you can see here, the wick clip, and wick stickers to stick the wick to the bottom of your glass jar. I also have a thermometer to measure the temperature of my wax. I like to melt my wax to about 190, 200. That is basically the flash point for this wax. For whatever wax that you use, I'm using coconut apricot wax. It will tell you generally on the packaging what the flash point is and what the melting point is. And so you need to follow those directions so that you're making your candle properly and you don't run into any issues. So I melt mine 190 to 200. I like to pour my wax into the pouring pitcher, and once it gets to about 175, I then mix in my fragrance oil, and then once it gets to about 160, I go ahead and pour. That works for me. My candles come out looking great and smelling great, even tops, all of that good stuff. So that's what works for me and my type of wax and the fragrance that I'm using. I always use alcohol to wipe out my jars and make sure that I've cleaned them thoroughly before pouring my wax into my jars. So let's go ahead and do the first step. And this is just regular 91% rubbing alcohol that I purchased from Walgreens, and I just pour it on a clean paper towel or towel, whatever you choose to use. And then I take my jars and I clean them out on the inside and the outside. These are coming from a manufacturing facility, so you never know what's sitting in the warehouse. So you want to make sure you're using clean jars, especially if you're sending these out to customers. Always be sure to wear gloves, especially during COVID. That's important. And again, after I pour the wax into my jars and allow these to cure, I will then use alcohol to wipe the outside again. to make sure that everything's really clean before I stick on my label, because if there's any type of debris or dirt or anything like that, or oils on the outside of the jar, your label will not stick as it should, and that's not going to be a good thing. So after I've cleaned my jars and I've allowed them to basically dry, I go ahead and I take my wicks and I put wick stickers on the bottom. So basically on the bottom of each wick, I put a wick sticker. This is really cute. It's a rounded wooden wick. You're not gonna leave this piece on when you put it into your candle and pour it. You just leave it on for purposes of keeping it in shape while you're actually pouring. Not pouring, but sticking the wick into the wick clip and putting the wick sticker on it. You don't want it to lose its shape. So it's important to leave that white piece on if you decide to go with a wick like that. So I have all of my wick stickers on, and again I'm using 3 because I'm doing a little bit more testing. Just want to see how those work. The wicks that I'm using now, I already tested and they work just fine, but I'm wondering if I use a wick that isn't so wide, if it will give me an even longer burn time, maybe 80 hours instead of 60, or you know, if it'll burn just as even, and you know what the flame will look like, and also if it will provide a stronger hot throw. My candles are already pretty strong, but it's always good to make good better, I guess you could say. I'm always testing and working to try to figure out what I can do different to make sure these are top quality. So my jar is dried, and I'm going to take the first wick, peel the wick sticker off of the bottom. And for these jars, they have like a little circular bottom. So it's really easy to go in the center while you're looking at it and just basically stick your wick in. Push it down a little bit, and as you can see, that's pretty much perfectly centered. Then I'm gonna go and do that for the next wick. Peel the bottom off, and then we're going to stick it directly in the center. That looks really good. And then I'm going to do the next one and stick this one directly in the center. So they are all centered and basically ready to go. Now we're going to take our thermometer and we're going to see what the temperature of the wax is that's been melting in the wax pot. So you can just stick it in and just kind of swirl it around a little bit and see where you are. And that's at about 200 degrees, which is great. So I just wipe it off with some alcohol and shut it off. And now it's time to basically pour the wax into the pitcher. I like to do my candles sometimes one by one rather than measuring the wax for all 3. I wouldn't say a perfectionist, but I think that for me sometimes that's a better method. So today I'm going to be doing it one by one. I'll just show you one for the sake of this video not being a movie. And then we'll go from there. So I basically just take my scale and I put it underneath my pouring pot. And then I set my pouring pitcher directly on top of the scale. Now we're gonna switch up the angle a little bit. Hold on a second. So I am measuring at grams, and you always want to start at 0. You want to measure about 340 grams of wax, which is good for a 12-ounce jar candle. I like to measure my wax in grams because it's more accurate, and you may go over a little bit. That's okay if you go 5 to 6 points over. 340 grams is not going to make or break your candle. After that, you want to measure the temp of your candle wax. Just set your thermometer in there and measure that as you move on to now pouring your fragrance oil. Again, start at 0, and for a 12-ounce candle, you're going to want to use 34 grams of fragrance oil. Again, if you go over a little bit, that's okay. It just makes a stronger candle. You don't want to go over too much though, because then it will affect your candle if you put too much fragrance oil. Remove your thermometer, wipe it off. After that, you're going to go ahead and start the process to pour your fragrance oil into your wax and mix it up. So I like to pour my fragrance oil fairly slowly. After I pour all of my fragrance oil in, I use my little wooden stick and I mix for 2 minutes. It's very important, 2 minutes. After mixing, you then want to go ahead and prepare your jar so that you can pour your wax into your jar. We've already stuck our wooden wick in, and so we're good to go to pour our wax into our jar. I like to pour my wax, again, fairly slowly. If you pour it too fast, it could cause some bubbling once your candle finally sets, and it could cause your top not to be as smooth as you would like it, and you'll have a few lumps and bumps. You really don't want that, so try to pour it slowly, and it'll make for an even candle. This is how it looks close up. You just see how the wax is, you know, setting in the jar, and it's already starting to solidify at this point. We made our first candle, yay! After you have poured your candle, you're going to allow it to cure for at least 24 hours. Also, it's really, really, really important that when you pour your candle, you're doing it on a leveled surface. Because if you do not, it will not give you a flat top, and that's not going to be good. So make sure you do that on a leveled surface, and after it has cured for about 24 hours, you're going to come back to the candle, and then it'll look like this. It has a nice flat top. The wick is even, and it's ready to be labeled. So then you put your label on. Which I've already shown in a different video, how I actually do my labels, and it's good to go. So hopefully this helped. Just a little tip, when I first started making candles, I tried to make probably 10 candles at once. But at this point, I didn't have my melting pot. So I had one pot, one boiler pot, double boiler pot, and like a little plug-in stove iron or whatever you want to call it, hot plate. So I thought the smart thing to do would be to buy these little plastic cups, which are like little mouthwash cups. And I poured and measured 10 fragrances and allowed them to sit in these cups while I melted my wax. Long story short, because of the acidity in the fragrance oils, it literally ate through the plastic. And when I came back over to my fragrances after melting my wax, all of my very expensive fragrance oils were all over my table. This was definitely a learning lesson. I lost a lot of money when that happened, because literally for some of my fragrance oils, just 2 ounces of the oil could cost me anywhere between $9 and $15 just for 2 ounces. So you do the math on 2 ounces of fragrance oil in 10 cups. That hurt. I learned my lesson, and from then on, I decided to just purchase these glass anchor cups. You can get them from Walmart. They're about $1.70 each. And I purchased one for basically each of my scents. And that allows me to measure several scents at once and then melt my wax and then just keep pouring and pouring and pouring without having to, take one of these, measure the fragrance, pour it into the wax, wash it out with soap and water, and do it all over again. So it really, really helps to have several of these glass jars to measure your fragrance if you're making multiple candles, multiple scents, multiple orders, whatever it may be at once. So that's something that I wanted to let you all know. Outside of that, as far as my fragrance to wax ratio, I'm using 12-ounce jars. And so for 12-ounce jars, I do 340 grams of the wax and 34 grams of the fragrance, which is about a 10% fragrance load. And that's amazing because I live in a house and I can light one of my candles in my living room area and literally I can smell it in my living room, my kitchen, and when I walk up the stairs. I can smell it almost to basically my bedroom, so I can smell it to the top of the stairs. So it really, really has a great hot scent throw. Before I tried to use about, I believe it was 7 to 8% fragrance load, and I really didn't smell it. It was way too light. And so I decided to up it. And when I did that, it worked out perfectly and I get the best scent throw. I think those are all the tips. I talked about my wicks and why I use wooden wicks in a different video, so you can check that out in the Entrepreneur Life playlist. And we made our candles, and so we're good to go. Hopefully this video was helpful. You learned something. It helps you on your journey. If you have any questions or comments, you can always leave it below. And of course, I'm going to leave links for fragrance oils, wicks, all of that good stuff that I talked about in this video to help you along in your journey. And I will be back with another video next week. Thank you so much for watching. Bye, loves.